Rusty, welcome back to Arches of Horror. On this podcast, we watch every horror release from Arrow Video. And this week, we watched 2017's Hounds of Love. Now, are you annoyed that I picked this film?
Not annoyed, but it was a tough watch. And not because of the subject matter. It was just not a great film.
I agree with you. I saw this at the Overlook Film Festival. I thought it was great at the time. And upon rewatching it, I've got a lot of issues with the film. Well, first I just want to say the theme song, the Blood Rage cover by Matt Akers. Check him out on Bandcamp.
Yes, and I think the other thing is you should mention about giving us ratings on iTunes.
Yes, please. I know this is the biggest podcast cliche, but our listener count is going up. And if we could just get some of you to rate and review, or at least rate the show 5 stars on iTunes. You may look at our iTunes and ask yourself, wow, how do these guys get 19 one-star reviews? I know the Life Force episode was pretty rough, but I didn't think they're that bad. Well, that was the result of a personal conflict which had nothing to do with this podcast. And I really wish that hadn't happened. And so if you can please help us.
Yes.
Help us dig ourselves out of this ditch that we've been saddled in since basically our second episode.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
Well, now, Rusty, it's time for 2017's Hounds of Love from Australia. Not quite. Did you think this movie was as enjoyable as Dead End Drive-In?
I would love to have just rewatched Dead End Drive-In and talked about that movie again.
I'm not cranky.
This film, I remember hearing about it at film festivals, and you hear about movies at film festivals, it's like, remember, I can't believe I'm making this comparison, but remember in South Park when there's like a flashback episode and Cartman sees like Benjamin Franklin and everyone's whispering like, oh, Benjamin Franklin, oh, Benjamin Franklin. I kind of feel like that's like film festivals. People will be like, oh, Hereditary, or, Hounds of Love. And these things get really hyped up. And then sometimes I don't even ever see what happened to the movie. Like it never seems to come out, or this movie had kind of a very small release, but then kind of legitimized by its Arrow video release.
I thought this movie was bigger than, like, I thought it had some kind of a fanfare to it.
I mean, it definitely got good reviews. It definitely had hype in the film festival world, but I feel like it came out and I don't really hear people mentioning it very much.
See, I mean, you're more into that world than I am, but like I heard about it and then I saw that it was an Arrow release, which I got excited about. It was like, oh, we could watch this movie now and discuss it. I regret that.
Yeah, I regretted it as well. I would say you're better off listening to the song Hounds of Love by Kate Bush for 107 minutes or however long this film is. Rusty, before we get into it, did you notice the doorknobs in this film are extremely high?
I did not notice that, but I noticed you keep pushing how high the doorknobs were. And I need to know, just how high were they since I missed it?
Dude, they are like shoulder level on the mom character. I called Rusty at 3 a.m. screaming about how high these doorknobs were. But let's give an overview of this film. It follows 2 serial killers who are a couple, and they kidnap young women, chain them to a bed, kind of like torture them and sexually assault them, and then kill them. And they kidnap this girl, Vicky, who realizes that the only way she's going to survive this ordeal is if she exploits the fissures in their relationship, which is also kind of an abusive relationship, and find a way to get out. That actually makes it sound better than it is.
Yeah, because we don't really get much of Vicky's POV, so we actually don't really see her exploiting the fissures in their relationship.
The biggest flaw of this film is that in the first act, it follows Vicky more. You get to know Vicky, and you kind of like her. I liked her, and she's in a scary situation, and then it shifts completely away from her, so we're no longer in her POV. And it becomes way more about the couple's dynamic. I think they could have still had that and still have it be Vicky's story. The balance of things is way off in this film.
Yeah, I really think the first act is done really well. Like I was pretty tense the whole time, like and very, very, very uncomfortable.
Yes, me too. The scene, probably the best scene in the film, would you agree, is when they first kidnap her.
Yeah, well, I did tell you that the other day, so you're just stealing that from me, but it is the best scene.
I'm going to be stealing all of your material on this film because this is a hard one to talk about. I think we've realized that we have more fun when we talk about movies that are a little goofier.
I got a bad feeling about this.
This was just, when I'm at a film festival, I can see anything. It's weird. Like, I just think film festival crowds, like, you're all there, you're all film people, you can deal with something extreme. And so I saw this and it was extreme, but I thought it was a good movie. When I was watching this at home, I just kept thinking, I hope the neighbors don't hear all this screaming.
Are you referring to when the mom repeatedly screamed Vicky for 10 minutes?
That was a weak moment.
Yes. The whole ending was weak.
When I first saw this movie at the Overlook Film Festival, and
are you plugging that?
I'm not.
Is that a plug?
No, I'm not, because I didn't have a good time there at all. It was in the hotel where the shining exteriors from the Kubrick movie were shot. The seats at the fest were like hotel, like conference room seats. So it was just torture. And this was one of the only kind of good movies that they programmed. And when the fucking Joy Division song kicks in at the end of the song and she is saved, I was almost sobbing. And now when I saw that at home, I just thought it was a cheap moment that didn't really work.
She wasn't even saved, but she just pretty much walked out. She could have walked out the front door, but instead she went out the bathroom window.
Yeah.
That scene just bothers me. It like made me like so annoyed watching it. And I was like, oh, is this going to happen now? And it's like everything I was thinking, like, please don't let this happen. And there it was.
Yeah.
It was like you said, it was just like all the cliches of it, like an ending for like a psychological thriller.
And I feel like when I watched this again, everything was very basic. Like the way that she manipulates her relationship was very basic. The way in which her mother and father are depicted is super basic. The implied backstory between their divorce is super basic. Like everything felt like a first draft. Like it just felt like, okay, this could have been a compelling idea for a movie. If it had just been written better. Like if this had been like a Hitchcock movie, it could have been an amazing situation where there could have been all kinds of mind games and stuff. But instead, it's not much to it.
Remember we said the lives of inferior beings are unimportant? Remember we said, we've always said, you and I, that moral concepts of good and evil and right and wrong don't hold for the intellectually superior. Remember, Rupert?
I don't want to shit on Ben Young because I don't really know anything about him, but he did write and direct it, and he seems, I don't know his other work, but he seems kind of young and maybe inexperienced.
I would agree that he seems Ben Young. He hates that. If you say that to his face, he's like, I'll punch you out right now, mate. I said never make a joke about my name, Young. And I'm like, at least you're young. Look at my hair, Ben. Did you watch his music videos?
I only watched the one that was on the Blu-ray, which I actually kind of enjoyed.
Yeah, it's called Only One by the John Butler Trio. They're probably huge in Australia, and we're like, the John Butler Trio?
Yeah. I have to say, though, I did really like the music, but the vocals fell short for me.
Yeah.
I would compare them to like an Outback, like Mumford and Sons, or like the Punch Brothers.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Like folksy, like indie rock.
There's something haunting me, running on thin ice. There's nothing you can see. I do all I can to hide. And all the rolling days, all the lonely nights, where you don't know your place, all the fights. Oh, I keep on.
Yeah, I completely 100% agree. And the video, it starts out with kind of like you said, a kind of Mumford & Sons style sound. And the scene being depicted is a couple fleeing from like a zombie apocalypse. And at first I thought, man, this guy's just making a fucking zombie short and he's putting this song. It doesn't match at all. But then it takes a twist where all the zombies kind of hear the great music of the John Butler Trio, and they go to a warehouse where they kind of dance to the song, and the band members are also zombies, and it had a very cute, fun feel.
Did you actually watch the whole video where you saw the ending? Because the ending, I like the little payoff it had, like where the music ends.
I watched the whole thing.
And
I watched it all.
And the zombies are no longer satiated by the music, and then they revert back to like feverish, brain-eating fiends that attack the couple.
Don't remember that at all.
So you watched the whole. What were you doing? Texting?
Yeah, texting. I was texting Ben Young. I was like, dude, you did a great job, and I promise I'm not going to do that pun on your name in the podcast.
You look after your mates, and your mates will always look after you.
Well, since you brought it up, let's just jump into the best scene in the movie. Leading up to that scene, this is after did we even say their names, John and Evie White?
We didn't.
They are the killers. They pick up the teen Vicky, and they trick her into getting into the car by saying that,
"Hey, love, do you want a lift?" "Oh, are you sure?" "Yeah, let's jump in."
And she's comforted by seeing a baby seat. She gets in the car and they bring her back, but she waits outside. And Evie offers her a drink of goon, which I was completely confused by. I never heard of goon. Have you?
Nope.
Goon is actually boxed wine. And we actually see Evie drinking it later, which I thought was like a Poland Spring water thing in the fridge.
Yeah, so did I.
I've never seen wine that comes from a box before.
It's pretty fancy, huh? Look, it's even got its own tap.
But anyway, so they get Vicky inside, and Evie and Vicky are talking, and they put on music, and then it's the Moody Blues song, Nights in White Satin, which is great for the scene. And Evie wound up spiking her goon, and her vision is starting to get fucked up. And at that moment, John comes back in, and he says he has the weed for her, but he realizes that she's fucked up and that she's not going anywhere. So him and Evie start dancing. And it's very, very like unsettling. Just the way they're like grinding and groping each other and just staring at Vicky. And Vicky knows something's wrong, so she tries to get up and leave. And she goes for the front door. And the way John just delivers the line saying, "Back door, love." And he's like, they always go for the front door. It's just such a like unsettling moment.
Yeah.
Like you just know that they've been doing it for several times for several victims.
'Cause I love you. Yes, I love you.
All the elements, like the way that the music sounds is really spooky, but it really, for me, my brother has been a prosecutor forever, and now he's the district attorney of Boulder County, although his primary election is on Tuesday, so by the time this airs, he'll either be elected or not. But he always tells me a lot of very intense crime stories. And I find that one of the types of crime stories he tells me is basically from the victim's perspective when they realize that things are about to get fucked up. Like when they realize that when they realize like, oh shit, I am like in a bad situation. And this movie really captures that moment. And you really are completely connected with Vicky, and you feel, oh fuck, as soon as they kind of like, because at first they're just weird and you're like, maybe they're just weird people. And then it just kind of escalates. And we're even, it's funny because we're even in Vicky's head to the extent that the music is distorted and like the vision is blurring. We're seeing from her POV. Mm-hmm. But then once she's chained to the bed, the story becomes the two killers who...
Yeah,
Russ, I don't know if you noticed this, but a little Easter egg. Do you know if you squint, the couple looks like Thomas Lennon and Ellie Kemper?
That's crazy you said that because I totally noticed that, and I mentioned it to Jen, but I don't even think you need to squint. I think they just kind of do. It's just like if they were just in like some ugly makeup. It's just like, oh, here's Thomas Lennon and Ellie Kemper in ugly makeup.
Yeah, I agree. But I thought I thought all the performances were pretty solid from the three leads. I know that you didn't like Vicky as much, played by Ashley Cummings.
I didn't love her performance, and I think that's due to the writing.
Yeah, I agree.
she was very simplistic. The way she tried to talk to Evie to like get sympathy, it didn't work for me.
He doesn't love you. He just uses you.
Yeah, she like her attempts to manipulate them are just like I keep saying basic, but just so basic. Like there's one scene where I was like, do they even remember this part of the storyline? And then she was like, he's just using you, you know. And it was just such like an obligatory line to like thrown in because it was like, oh, I have that moment.
And I hate that you do, like, would you really think that would work? Like, if you were married to somebody and you were committing these like ghastly murders, do you think by somebody saying he's using you, would that really like do something in their head that would make them be like, oh, they're right. Let me free this person. Like, it just seems like you said, very basic. But I did like when Vicky tries to tell Evie like, oh, my dad's a surgeon. He's wealthy. He could like pay a ransom. And like, Evie doesn't give a shit about that, so she's just like, "Oh, we know. That's why we took you." But that's obviously not the reason. So she's playing her own like psychological games. And even like Evie leaves the room and she's just like, "Little shit." Like that's not going to work. And I think Evie the whole time did resent Vicky. Like she never really formed any kind of bond with her or any kind of like empathy.
Yeah, I read your little diary. Your mum wouldn't let you out, so you snuck out, didn't you? Probably not even looking for you.
That's why I hated the ending so much, that like all of a sudden she like literally stabbed her husband in the back and let Vicky just walk freely. Like that would never happen. That would never ever happen. And it's like shame on the director for trying to like fool us into believing that would happen.
Yeah, not quite earned. And Evie was played by Emma Booth. Now, Rusty, did you look up photos of Emma Booth? Because she actually looks much different than she did in this film.
He's a peeping Tom.
Well, she was actually a former teen model.
Oh, and she's, of course, younger than me.
Well, I find it shocking that the lead, John White, is younger than me. No, actually, I think he's like my age.
Stephen Curry, right?
Yeah, who happens to be a comedic actor.
Yeah. And he does a great job in this movie. You really hate him.
Yeah.
Every time he's on screen, you tense up.
I mean, he said his look for this role was the quintessential like 1986 everyman, like the person that you could trust, and that really was like a look of 1986. That like weird mustache that every older guy seemed to have. Did your dad ever have a mustache?
No.
You sound so disappointed.
No, I was thinking because it kind of vaguely sounds familiar, but no. Definitely some of my uncles, but not my dad.
Do you remember in 1986 though, like, because Stephen Curry, who plays John White, also said that like in 1986 that it was very common just to let your kids go out for the day and just tell them like, oh, just come home before sundown. And that's something that's unheard of now. Like if a parent heard like another parent letting their kids do that, they would be like shocked. Do you remember doing that as a kid, just like leaving?
Oh, hugely.
I remember a few times that my mom would come looking for either my brother or myself.
Oh yeah.
But like that was like at like midnight where she's just like, get home so I could go to bed. And we were like 13 years old, just leave at like noon during the summer, come home at like 11 o'clock at night.
All my parents asked of me, they wanted me to write my name down on a piece of paper in case I got killed. And so like out of my like whatever kind of like, remember those like black shorts you have with like a sports team on them? Those like long shorts?
Yeah. Well, did you say lax?
No, but
like I thought you meant the lacrosse shorts.
No, but just like those kind of shorts with like one slip of paper. There's just like Eddie Darty.
Wait, those shorts didn't have pockets. Where are you keeping that slip in your underwear?
Oh my God. You know, Rusty, I'm not even, this whole podcast is a lie. No, I'm talking, I had these Boston Celtics shorts that were like black and like cloth material, and they definitely had pockets. And you know, Rusty, the last time that I wore those shorts, I had to piss so bad. I'll never forget it. And I went running upstairs to my upstairs bathroom. It was like the summer, and I just couldn't get them untied. It was like a ticking clock in a movie, like trying to defuse a bomb. And I was like, and I just pissed fully in them, just all over them. And even though I was like in 8th grade, I just broke into sobs over the toilet, pissing myself and crying.
Now you just don't give a shit. Now you'll just, whatever, I'll pee in my shorts.
Dude, sometimes I'll just be walking in my apartment and piss dribbles on the floor. I think I'll just evaporate.
You know what happened to me one time, speaking of peeing in your shorts? I also have trouble peeing in public. I get very pee shy. I've overcome that to some extent, but I still don't like doing it. Mm-hmm. But back in middle school, because I played sports, so after I wouldn't pee in school all day, and if we played sports, I didn't want to pee either. But there was a track and field event, and I really had to go. So I went to the bathroom, and there was no one there, which was a good sign for me to be able to piss. And if you remember, our colors were white, so we had white shorts. And I was peeing at the urinal, and somebody walked in, and I got so scared that I quickly pulled up my shorts and happened to pee in them a bit. Not much, but enough. And it dried a big yellow circle right around my crotch area. And as we were taking the bus home from the event, one of the other people on the team said, "Oh, Rusty, what's on your crotch? Did you piss yourself?" And I was just like, no, that's a grass stain. And just like, oh, that makes sense. You were laying in the grass. I'm just like, wow, he bought that. So to this day, he was thinking that I was just laying in grass and had a grass stain, a yellow grass stain right on my crotch.
Wow.
But the truth be known, it was urine.
Wow. To give you a flip side to that, I remember one day in film school, this guy who I didn't really hang out with very much was like, "Hey, you want to go see Ocean's 12 at like Mann's Chinese Theater?" And I was like, "I guess so," even though I've never liked those movies. And we went to the movie theater, and after the movie, the guy got really weird kind of all of a sudden. And he had been like, "Oh, after the movie, when we go like in the mall or whatever." And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, you want to go to the mall?" He's like, no, I'm gonna go." And like, I was like, "Why is that guy acting weird?" And then I just hadn't noticed that this was not urine, but I must have leaned up against the counter in the bathroom, and my pants, which were like khakis, believe it or not, they were just soaked. It looked like I just fucking fully pissed, and then was like, "Yo, want to go to the mall? Do you want to go to the mall?" With this giant wet stain. And to this day, I think there's probably people who think like, "Oh, Ed Darty, the guy who pissed himself when he went to go see the movie," like the guy probably told everybody.
"I just pissed in my pants, and nobody can do anything about it."
I don't know what to do about this note, Rusty. But I wrote, "If I met that guy, all of my Chinese Kenpo skills would be released."
Now, you haven't practiced in a while. Do you think you still have any of those moves?
I do not. I do not think I have any of those moves.
For our audience out there, you did at one time own a stretching machine.
Yes.
Did that ever help you in any way, in any of your street brawls?
Well, the stretching machine wasn't really about street brawls. As you may know, no one in my family can sit Indian style, or cross-legged, as I should say. And it's just a family curse. And when I got the stretching machine, I thought that would enable me to sit Indian style, but it didn't. But because there was one move, like the Chinese Kenpo thing was just so lame. And it was just basically like each belt was like 30 moves that you would learn that were all based on like super specialized situations. And there was one where it was like, if you're sitting cross-legged and go to shake someone's hand and they like end up trying to attack you, like this is what to do. And so when I would try to sit cross-legged, I would just roll back on my back. And the sensei guy, whose name, believe it or not, was also Ed Darty, was just like laugh. He couldn't even understand what was happening. He was like, no, sit like on your butt. And I'd be like, sit on my butt. And I'd just roll back like a fucking Russian nesting doll.
Didn't you also have a sensei from Nassau Community College that disliked you?
I did. This guy was the champion of Okinawa. He was a very serious Japanese sensei. He was very mean. I remember we all had to get these white gis, and he would write your name in magic marker in like kanji on your gi, and he would just like yank you towards him and be like, "What's your name?" And you're like, "Ed," and he's like roughly writes this like thing in magic marker, then pushes you away.
What do you think he really wrote on yours?
You dance very nice, like geisha.
Here's the thing, which I'm sure you remember. but before the class began, he told all of us that he didn't care about grades. It was like, he was like, self-defense is very serious. He told the story about how he had done a tournament with Chuck Norris, and Chuck Norris's students weren't hitting for real and his were. And Chuck Norris was like, hey man, can you calm it down? These guys are like hitting really hard. And he was like, on the street, it's for real. And this guy was so intense. But so he told us all, he was like, I don't care about grades. I will give all of you A's. So don't worry about grades. Worry about actually doing the karate. And our final exam was like 50 people in the class, all doing a kata at once across the room. And
it's so cringy.
The next day was ridiculous. And the next class, he was like, he's like, I gave all of you except for 3 people A's.
Which one did you get?
You can see where this story is going. And so I went to Nassau, and basically as soon as I got there, like before I went to college, I was kind of like, I don't even know if I want to go to college. Maybe I'll just be like an artist and play in this band. And then like I got to Nassau and I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I was like, I gotta get the best grades I can and get into a good school. And so I was really obsessed with my GPA. So I don't know if you remember that they'd post the classes at like midnight, like the grades, like you'd call some 800 number and get the grades. And
yeah, I remember you were very obsessed with that.
Yeah, I was. So it was like 12:01 and I called up and I got a B in that karate class, which I thought was going to turn my 4.0 into like a 3. Like I didn't really know how things were weighted in terms of how many credits were each class. And I was like, that motherfucker. And I knew that my anger would fade. So I was like, I'm going to leave a message on his answering machine. And I went in the phone book. I found his dojo and I called it up and he answered the phone. He was like, oh, hello. And this is like a very Japanese guy. I'm not doing the voice because that would be racially insensitive. But I was like, hey, I just want to say, I got a B in that class. I shouldn't have got a B. Like I do karate and I have all A's in all my other classes. And he is like, oh, sometimes the person who gets A's in classes is a geek and can't do sports.
I just wanted to say that I'm a nerd.
And I was like, this is bullshit. And he was like, then come down to my dojo and do it again. And I was like, oh, I can't do it on your turf, man. I was like, this is bullshit though. This is bullshit. And then I don't know if you remember, I had that phone that was like a see-through plastic phone that was very ubiquitous in the 90s where you could see like the gears and everything.
I love that phone. That was like in every Sears magazine. It was always like for years.
Oh yeah.
I always wanted that phone.
Well, I had it, buddy. And
it worked like shit, right? Wasn't that like a gift on Double Dare? Wasn't like the first prize like the see-through phone?
That was one of the gifts. But prizes, we're calling it gifts.
Well, that first event was a gift.
I had like a broken phone cord, like just like a, like a, not even a dot, like probably cost $0.25 to get a new phone cord. But instead I spent my entire teenage years with this broken phone cord. So it would pop out of the wall at any given moment. And I was on the phone with the guy and I was like, this is bullshit. And then it popped out of the wall. And for some reason I called him back and he was like, why you hang up on me? And I was like, I'll just call him back and say I didn't hang up on you. My cord popped out of the wall. And he was like, so are you going to come to my dojo and take the test again? And I was like, no, I won't. Goodbye. Thank you for your time, sir.
You know how they like remade Karate Kid? They did the Cobra Kai. And they didn't remake it, but they brought back the Cobra Kai. We should do that with you. Like we should get in touch with this guy. Have you like build up where you meet him and perform that kata for him and get that A.
I need to see. I got to see if they have those stretching machines on Amazon. That's my first step.
You're the best around. Nothing's gonna ever keep you down. You're the best around. And nothing's gonna ever keep you down. You're the best around. Nothing's gonna ever keep you down.
So Rusty, back to the film Hounds of Love.
What other scenes did you enjoy?
I think the best scene we already talked about. Basically, everything when they're in the house and she is like locked up is pretty painful. Like, and not in a, I don't know. The movie really lost me throughout that section.
You know what I hated about where she was tied up? Because we never really got her POV after the first act or after she was abducted. I just hated that, like, you would see that, like even when like the first sexual assault and she was like staring off at like the child's like figurine.
I just wanted to say that I feel like that's so cliche.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like, I feel like that originally is from like Fast Times at Ridgemont High when Jennifer Jason Leigh is having sex for the first time. She looks up at like the graffiti or whatever. And now I feel like that's something that people do way too fucking much.
But anytime she was like left alone, whenever they resumed like where they would go back in the room with her or whatever, she was always just doing the same thing. It's just like, I would like to like somewhat experience what she's going through. Just to, like, it would make it so much more like harrowing.
Exactly. We never got to feel what it's like to be chained up to a bed for days. Just like in Gerald's game, you do get that. In this, she's basically just like a prop that like they'll open the door and she's still in the same position. And it's just like, you know.
Yeah, like my thought is like even just like, how do you sleep at night? Like, what's her thoughts as she's just laying in bed, like as they're sleeping as well? Like, what's the next day going to bring? Do you know that your like fate is coming? She really didn't make that much of an effort either to manipulate them. She said a few things here and there, but like with John, she made no attempts. Just 'cause I guess she knew how much of like a sociopath he was. But with Evie, like she didn't really try to connect. She kind of talked down to her almost.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's good for you. Like even like in the ending when Vicky escapes and she meets Evie in the driveway and she like defiantly like walks past her. I just hated that.
Yeah. Evie, it's a very like fake moment where Evie kind of like stands with like the knife and we think she's gonna have like a final battle. And instead Vicky like walks past her and kind of like brushes past her and gives her like a look.
Yeah.
Whereas like once you've been through all that, wouldn't you just she easily could have ran around her. Wouldn't you have just been like, I'm going to run around her just to be safe?
Yeah, exactly. And did Vicky even spot her mom's car at that point, or was she just like going towards the street?
I'm not sure, actually.
You know what's another thing that I know we discussed already and that we both hated? The stupid like misdirection.
Oh, yeah. There's several moments in this movie where you're way too aware of the filmmaking. And two of them are big cheats where, you know, we see in the beginning that kind of like what their sequence is for killing people. And we think that they've killed her. And we see John going to where he buries the bodies.
He's driving off to the national forest. And we don't even know how far that is from their house.
Yeah. We see Evie, like she looks happy. Like it looks like everything's resolved. And the music that's playing kind of implies all this. And then it cuts back to Vicky and she's still there. And it was just like, why did we see all that? And it was like, if not for the tools of filmmaking, we never would have come to that wrong conclusion anyway. So it just felt like such a cheat. And also, why the fuck is John digging the grave several days in advance? Like, what if some hikers come by and see a grave? They're like, hey, the police should stake out this grave. It just seems like if you're gonna go there twice, like, why don't you just go there once and just get it all done with?
I mean, at that point, he wasn't even ready to get rid of her. Like, it was Evie pushing him. So at that point, he was going to keep her until the Monday. So it could have been, like you said, days before, right?
Yeah. And so then the other big cheat moment.
This one annoyed me.
Yeah. When we first meet her, Vicky, and her bogan boyfriend,
mate,
we see them very unnaturally like showing each other a code that they send each other, which is just like, might as well put a fucking ringing alarm on that hint that's going to come up later. And Vicky then sends her mom a letter that doesn't really make much sense, which Evie should have picked up on. But through circumstances, the boyfriend ends up decoding the letter, which has the address of the house. And they go to where we think the address is, and Vicky's knocking. And it's cutting between the mom knocking and them inside hearing the knocking. Now, of course, every fucking movie does this stupid thing where then they open the door and it's not the person, it's someone else. We've seen it a lot, but it was like, that's totally cliche, but in this movie, it felt even worse than normal.
I feel like a lot of it was like when they were making the film that they almost had to go back and like, oh, we just need to do a scene to explain this. Like, so they had that scene where like, you see John with the drug dealers that he owes them money. So they could later explain the guy like just randomly showing up, collecting the money.
Oh, it was also the drug dealers who he owes money to. It was kind of interesting to see that they kind of bully him, even though he's like a serial killer. And, you know, it's always disconcerting to see an adult get bullied, even one as horrible as him.
What are you looking at, butthead?
But I think that was part of it. I'll give him a little bit of credit. I think that the guy, John, was just such a loser that he had no control in his outside life except for abducting young women.
That's true. So then he couldn't stand up to the bullies, but he like dominated his wife, and then obviously really abused these people.
He did some really creepy things, and like the actor really sold some of them. Like just the scene like when they're arguing in front of Vicky when she's tied to the bed or chained to the bed, and they're arguing about I think the dog, after the dog was murdered, and they walk out of the room, but he like winks at her. And also like when he's assaulting her and he's just like, look at me, and just the way he's saying it.
Yeah.
That made me uncomfortable.
Now let's go in there and have a little bit of fun.
The murder of the dog felt a little unearned and also very off-putting.
I didn't get it. Like it just seemed like for shock value. Because obviously John had a temper and he didn't hold back from hitting Evie, but like that seemed out of character for him. But you know what really made me sad about that scene, and anybody that watches it, of course, like animal death is a big like taboo for most people.
Yeah.
Especially anything cruel. And just the dog's face when he was yelling at it after shit on the floor. Like I felt so bad for that dog.
Yeah.
But the one thing I could relate to was John's anger. I felt the same way when I used to play Super Nintendo, playing like Madden. Did you ever get mad playing? I'm sure you had to have gotten mad playing like those old like cheap like games like NBA Jam and the Madden.
Oh my God.
Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, of course.
Like how many controllers did you go through? Or you were not that crazy?
No, I definitely threw my share of controllers, but I never broke any of them.
I broke a couple. See, you know what's funny? That nothing else in my life at that age, or even now, made me that crazy and that like out of control. It's fucking those cheap games.
I just remember when you'd get far in a cheap game and your hands would just be sweating so hard.
Oh, like Castlevania. I was never able to beat Castlevania, but getting like past like Frankenstein and into like what was the next one after that? The Reaper.
I never got past Frankenstein.
I remember almost getting to the Reaper. Like I knew it was coming and like dying right beforehand, or having like maybe like 1 bar of health and getting there and immediately getting killed.
The worst is when I'd always do this thing where I would jump and then I'd be like, shit, I shouldn't have jumped there, and like try to turn back, but then you always die. And I was like, oh, I should have just tried to go all the way.
Mamma mia.
I don't doubt that the police could have been as useless as they were, but it felt so cliche, like when the parents would go there and like that could have been from any movie, that dialogue where they're just like, our daughter would not have run away. And they're like, well, she's not officially missing until blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, oh God, another one of these scenes.
Well, they knew they wanted to set it up where the mom took it upon herself and with her intuition, like knew exactly what to do. I still don't understand how she knew about the game that her daughter had with the bogan boyfriend. Like, how did she know about the crypto wordplay?
I don't remember, but I think that she thought to call him, and then I'm pretty sure that like it just cut to like him looking at the letter and like doing the code, but I'm not sure.
Do you remember the scene where like Evie says to Vicky, like, where she makes her feel guilty about like, if you just listen to your mom, you wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever like disobey your parents and do something that got you into trouble? I don't mean just like crossing like Sunrise Highway where you weren't supposed to, but
not that I can recall right now.
You know what I did? My mom was very opposed. She went through this like short-lived like religious renaissance where she was opposed to like nudity and like smut. And since my dad, I guess, was very into watching dirty movies, which I would occasionally watch, like unbeknownst to him. And, you know, he would take us to like the South Shore Video or like Royal Video, and he would go in the red room or the red lit room.
The red room.
So like at that point, I don't know, like my mom would just preach to me, and I guess it trickled down. I remember like going to like any of the parks or in any of like the woods, and you'd always find like an abundance of porno mags.
I mean, it's so cliche, but it's so true. I thought we were the only ones who encountered them, but it's like such a famous thing, woods porn.
But I remember one time friends and I found a magazine called G-String, which I'm sure you could guess what was on the cover.
William F. Buckley.
Close. It was actually George Brett after the Pine Tar incident.
Oh my God, that's great. Speaking of aggro, that guy probably broke a few Nintendo controllers himself.
Oh, remember how angry he was after that pine tar incident?
Wait, did I already tell the story that I in 5th grade?
You did, but I cut it.
Oh, okay. But in 5th grade, we had to start businesses, and I had a video rental business, and me and my partner in the business just wrote down like movies that were not even out on video yet. We're like, we can get Die Hard somehow. Like we wrote down a list of all the movies, and everyone in our class like filled out their order sheet for what they wanted from us. And then I was like, okay, well, this is good, but the only videos I have are Secret of My Success and the George Brett Pine Tar incident.
How many people rented that? There had to be one. There had to be a weird kid that rented
I remember took pity on me. He took pity on me and he was like, I'll take the Pine Tar incident.
They might be going to call George Brett out.
Well, he is. He's out.
Yes, sir.
Brett is out. Look at this. Brett is out. And
He's steaming mad.
he is out and having to be forcibly restrained from hitting plate umpire Tim McClellan.
Rusty, do you remember one of the early shots of the film? Well, the movie starts out with kind of like these slow-mo shots of girls playing, I don't know if it was basketball or what it was. And they're kind of like objectifying shots. And you're kind of like, oh, am I a perv or something? Like the movie's trying to make me complicit in this. And then you realize that the killer is the guy watching this. So, but then there was kind of a similar shot where it went through a neighborhood and it was kind of like the shot was like dollying across or like in a car, but everyone in the neighborhood was like in slow-mo. It was kind of like Paperboy in slow-mo, which was a very music video-esque kind of shot. It was like very showy in a way that did not work with the movie. But the whole point of the shot is that the camera eventually lands on Vicky's mom's house, and that house was so overgrown. Like, I guess we're supposed to think like, oh, she's neglecting the house, she's overworked, she's taking care of Vicky, but it was like a fucking jungle.
What a dump.
We have to get a botanist to even tell us if that's possible. We need to find E.T. and be like, E.T. He's like, huh. We're like, have you ever seen Hounds of Love? It's kind of a random Australian movie, and he's like, I don't know.
E.T. phone home.
Wait, I have a theory though for that. I'm going to maybe throw you under the bus here, but my theory is, didn't the mom just move in, so maybe she didn't have time to do the landscaping, and it was probably like a cheap house?
Maybe. But the other houses are all kind of cheap houses in the same neighborhood, and they all like have lawns. And then you come to like the Amazon, and it's like, what the fuck? I saw some gorillas in the mist fucking on the lawn. Rusty, one moment I had to mention also. So there's kind of a sub, I guess I wouldn't call it a subplot, just like a character detail that Evie wants to get her kids back. And it's kind of like Julianne Moore in Boogie Nights, except that Julianne Moore in Boogie Nights is like sympathetic. And when she doesn't get her kids back, it feels sad. And when Evie would talk about like, I just got to get my kids back, I was like laughing out loud because I was like, she should not get her fucking kids back. But she was on the payphone and like hearing that she's not going to be able to see them or whatever. And she hangs up. And this guy comes out of the store and she's like, what the fuck are you looking at? But the guy has barely left this. He's like in the doorway and was like not even looking at it. Like it happens way too fast.
Yeah, he was barely out of that door. I think she was just looking for anything though to yell at. And the true story, she actually left her kids like in her family to be with the guy, to be with the murderer.
And she had 7 kids, right?
So 7 kids, yeah. Do you know in the real story though, I'm jumping to the ending for a second. In the real story, the survivor actually did make it out the bathroom window. That's how she fled after she was loosely chained up. And she jumped out the window and hopped the gate into a neighbor's yard and was attacked by a dog. So, I mean, you can see the comparisons. Do you think her not getting the kids back, was that John's fault or was that like more of her bad parenting?
I think it was definitely a combination of both. Back to the ending for a second. So one scene I did not like was Evie has Vicky write a letter to her parents. She's like, write a letter to your parents, say you're in Adelaide and you're all happy now. You're going to stay there. And Vicky's like, I thought this was like a ransom. Like she realizes in that moment that they're going to kill her. And Evie makes her take like what seems like it's going to be like a lethal overdose of pills. And it just seemed so bullshit because John was so sadistic clearly liked inflicting pain on people, it seemed like really weird that he'd want her to be killed via like sleeping pills off camera, from his perspective, off camera. And it really just seemed like it existed to set up the final battle when they could have done that any other number of ways.
Hey, you, get your damn hands off her.
Rusty, how comic was their sad Christmas tree? I felt like their Christmas tree was just a little too sad.
It was a very sad Christmas tree.
Yeah.
I did like how it was set up in that parlor, though. I did like the look of that.
Yeah, that was cool.
I wouldn't want to live there, but I like the look. It was very gloomy. But you know what I want to know? Did you see that sole Christmas present underneath that sad Christmas tree?
There's just one Christmas present that looked like so shittily wrapped.
It looked like a dildo.
It did look like a dildo.
I want to know what you think that one gift could have been.
It was a dildo, I think.
Oh, really? I mean, what would they get each other? They're pretty sadistic, or they're very sadistic.
I don't know. It's just hard for me to even imagine being in that kind of... I always think about murderers. Like, do they always just walk around thinking, like, can't believe I killed someone that time?
I want to know about like couples that murder together. Like, how do you convince the other person?
I've always just wondered, how does that conversation first start? You know, you're like,
does it just happen naturally, or do you is it a slow build? Like, how does that work?
I don't know. I guess it's probably different every time, but maybe sometimes some people joke and then they're like, no, but for real, like, wouldn't you, or you're like having sex and you're like, what would be the ultimate thrill?
I could see that. I mean, I can't see it, but like that makes more sense.
Rusty, what do you think is more likely, that you and Jen will become a murdering couple? That you and Jen will become a murdering couple, like the couple in Hounds of Love, or that you'll see the film Solo in the theater?
I don't want to answer that.
Because you know the answer is that you'll become a murdering couple.
I think I'm running out of time too to see Solo, so I have no choice.
Oh yeah, it has nothing to do with you guys being sadistic. It has to do with how I know you're not going to see that movie.
Since when do you know how to fly? 190 years old? You look great.
Rusty, do you know the last note I wrote about this movie?
What's that?
It says, "I really, with really underlined, need to watch Seinfeld."
That's a good pick to lighten the mood.
Yeah, I was like, I need to take a shower, and when that's done in about 3 hours, I'm gonna watch some Seinfeld.
Nice. Did you actually watch any Seinfeld?
I did.
Did you really? Which episode?
The subway.
Oh, I don't like that episode.
Neither do I. I was looking at a list of like the best episodes ever, and that was ranked really high. So then I watched it, and I was like, that wasn't very good. But I also watched The Opposite, which I really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. When George does the opposite of everything.
Yeah, that's a good episode.
George Costanza.
Yeah, good friend. You know which episode I love? The episode where George Costanza, I don't know why I'm saying Costanza now, people know, where George loses his glasses, or thinks he loses his glasses, and he gets the new prescription. And then that's the same episode where Elaine gets bit by the dog and she thinks she has rabies.
Oh, I only vaguely remember this. I should watch that again.
That's one of my favorite episodes.
Rabies? Oh, that's fatal. You don't want that.
No, I don't want it. I don't need you to tell me what I don't want, you stupid hipster doofus.
What is this? What's going on here?
I'm sorry, Kramer. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
I'm sorry.
I had a friend who had rabies once.
The last thing that I want to say, and it's not about the movie, it's just a funny anecdote, I guess.
Okay.
Hopefully it's funny.
Okay.
Since the leads are well, at least John White is a sociopath. I remember in elementary school, this classmate of mine, whose also name was White, his last name, was definitely like a sociopath in training. And he was that type of kid that would just say like horrific things, like that he killed a cat with a baseball bat, which sounds a lot like you.
Okay, I'll have to tell that story after you go.
And he also lived in a motel. He lived in the Jones Beach Motel, which was such a seedy, like, place to visit. I don't even think many people went there, like down that street.
I don't think a lot of people knew it was even there. I only learned it was there when I was a pizza delivery boy.
Yeah. I don't know what kind of people live there, but I assumed they were what you would call bogans, maybe, or even worse than that.
It always felt a little harrowing going there.
Looking at it, because you could see it from the park. You could see like the backside of it. But anyway, so he lived there, and he was like the kid that like had cooties. Like nobody interacted with him. But anyway, so we had a field trip where we went to the Bronx Zoo, and we went there and we went off on our own. We had our own little like chaperone groups, and we met up back at the bus at whatever time. And when they did a head count, he was missing. And people were like, fine, when they put it together, like, they said, "Oh, it's the guy, blank white." And people were like, "Oh, should we look for him?" And it's like, "Nah, let's just leave." So we actually left him at the Bronx Zoo.
That is amazing. That would never happen now.
It would never ever happen now. But that the fact that we collectively made that decision to leave this kid at the Bronx Zoo,
and then years later, people saw him living like one of like the altered states cavemen in the ape enclosure. They're like, "Wait, that's not an ape."
I like that you referenced altered states.
It wasn't a seizure. You saw the x-rays, Mason. There was clearly something anterior to the larynx that looked like a laryngeal sac. That's strictly simian. I obviously regressed to some quasi-simian creature.
But back to me killing cats with a baseball bat. So to tell this story really quickly, when I was in 10th grade, I had a crush on this girl that everyone had a crush on. Everyone had she was like in Can't Buy Me Love,
we're bringing that back up.
The Amanda Peterson character. Yes, we are. The Amanda Peterson character. That was like this girl. Mm-hmm. And so I had a crush on her, and I tried to be like, "I like you," but it did not work out at all. And years later, one of my, so-called friends started talking to her, and his whole entry into talking to her, and he eventually dated her, was telling stories about how I had stalked her. None of these things were true. And he told her that I was so crazy that I went around town with a wiffle ball bat killing cats. And for some reason, the wiffle ball bat, it just makes it so much more fucked up, because it's like, how many times you got to kill a cat with? They probably got to hit it like 1,000 times.
And what hour of the night were you allegedly going around killing cats? Like,
how can I even catch a cat with a wiffle ball bat? And speaking of sociopaths, when I found this out, I couldn't even. It was like one of those things that like I couldn't even compute. It was so horrifying. Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Did you tell her that I killed cats with a wiffle ball bat?" And he's like, "I did." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "It was funny."
How do you even get yourself out of that hole? Like, you can't explain to her, like, whatever he said is not true. I swear I don't kill cats. You just look so guilty either way.
I bet there's like so many people from our high school that still to this day believe like that I kill cats. Like they see me post on Facebook and they're like, "Look at that fucking cat killer trying to push his video."
Well, you haven't been to the high school recently. If you go there, on the wall of fame, you have the football players, the basketball players, and then there's you, cat killer. Over 250 confirmed killed cats.
Wow, that's really bleak.
You're next to Jim Valvano's memorial.
The weird thing is that Checkers, Richard Nixon's dog, is buried in the pet cemetery in our town.
You killed that too?
No, I was possessed. I was possessed by Checkers because he hates cats. He hated them.
Checkers hated cats?
And yes. And then, so he possessed me. It was like that Ninja 3, the Domination, or whatever that one's called. I'm going around with
the possession.
Or I think it's the possession, but I think I got that wrong in a previous episode. So I think it's whatever it is. Oh. She finds a sword that's possessed by a spirit of a ninja. I found a wiffle bat. It was possessed by Checkers, Richard Nixon's dog, and then I started killing cats with it.
Didn't she just get naked when she was possessed with the sword? What were you doing when you were possessed with the bat?
Oh, I was naked. That was my whole bit. Going out naked, standing in front of her house, looking up at it, and just throwing a dead cat on her lawn and being like, "Do you love me now?" And I was like, if only she could listen to me, and I could just tell her some early rumors about the new Star Wars films they might make.
I love how you're tying it all together.
It's all tied together. And then she was like, "Why would I date him? He's going to be bald in 3 years anyway."
And now you tied in the series. It's brilliant.
And then I had the Venga Boys on a boombox.
You know what I like about that? You set it up now. If people don't know what you're saying or referring to, they have to listen to the catalog of episodes.
It's going to be such a disappointing Da Vinci Code to get through, to combine all those things.
Oh, man. All things lead to our friend Dan. That's the answer.
That's true. Well, there you have it. Rusty, you have anything else to say about Hounds of Love?
No, and I'm going to ask you before you ask me, would you recommend it?
Before this episode, after that first viewing, I had been recommending it. And now I think I don't recommend it anymore.
Did you have to issue a retraction in the paper to everyone you mentioned it to?
Well, everyone's like, I just watched this horrifying movie, and I knew I shouldn't have taken the word of the guy who kills cats with a wiffle ball bat. But I thought, it sounds fun. I like dogs. I like love, Hounds of Love. But it was actually quite bleak.
I guess we could say we promise to be back with our next episode that will be more of a lighthearted horror film. Something more along the lines of a Mutilator.
I was thinking about the Mutilator during this film because the Mutilator's aged really well in my mind. Like, I just have an affection for it. I think that's like a funny episode. And I wish I was watching the Mutilator.
It's really weird. At the time, we we didn't destroy it, but we bashed it a little bit. But in retrospect, I kind of actually like the Mutilator now.
Me too. And I think
like it's grown on me.
I think
it's all the Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. I think following the Mutilator shop on Instagram, which is clearly Buddy Cooper or his son, has made me love them.
Well, there was a post today about Trace Cooper being a mayor or something, or a councilman in that area. I forgot where it was filmed. So congratulations to Trace Cooper.
Trace Cooper, he made it. I thought when he accidentally shot his mom with a gun, I thought his life was over.
Mama.
But he pulled it together.
Mama.
Mama.
There you have it.
There you have it. Hounds of Love. See ya on July 15th. Howling 2, Lady Gaga.